Welcome. Not your first rodeo here at Go Local Live.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Tomorrow, legislature's back in session.
That's right.
And there's a lot of big bills. This is Business Monday. There's some big bills that organized labor in the business community have been battling over a little bit. I think there's some businesses who favor the bill on sick leave, and some who've been adamantly opposed. In a fair disclosure, Go Local has editorially strongly supported the legislation, and wanted to get a sense of where it is and what you think is going to happen over the next few days.
Yeah, well, I am really excited. It's looking like this legislation that, countless workers and community members and advocates and colleagues of mine in the House and the Senate have put a tremendous amount of effort into.
And describe what the bill does.
So the legislation that, God willing, we're going to pass tomorrow, it would allow for basically all workers to be able to breathe a little sigh of relief, knowing that choice between your family's health and your paycheck or your job can to a significant degree become a thing of the past. It starts in 2018, where all folks are going to have be able to earn up to 3 days of sick time, then 4 days, then 5 days. We've got some significant protections and flexibility. I think the business community should be pretty pleased with the compromise that came out. We really worked hard to listen to all stakeholders. But at the same time, this is a real raising of the bar, raising of the floor. We're creating a guarantee and saying that, when Rhode Islanders have to send their kids to school sick, when people have to put off urgent medical care because they can't afford a day off, when folks get let off because of a medical crisis, those are issues of basic human dignity, and we should be treating them as such in public policy. And I do want to share my appreciation for Go Local Prov taking that editorial stand. Certainly, not every editorial body in the state did that, and so I want to share my gratitude.
I got to tell you, it's just common sense. We have a hard, fast rule here, which is if you're sick, stay at home. Especially if you have a fever and you can get everybody else sick. And I've especially been surprised at the hospitality industry. I don't want, as a customer going into a restaurant, I don't want somebody going in and cooking or preparing food or serving food or cleaning up after the fact who might have something that is spreadable, that's running a fever, et cetera, et cetera. And you see it from time to time where there will be an outbreak at a restaurant. It's tied to some dishwasher or some poor person who felt like I better get to work or I'll be in big trouble, or I need the money, or I can't possibly take the time off. And it just seems like common sense to me in 2017.
So it's a worker right issue. It's also obviously a public health issue, as you mentioned. There are studies out there that jurisdictions that have passed paid sick time policies, they see lowering in the rates of flu and things like that. So this is a real deal.
And can there be abuse, which I think is one of the areas of concern by the business community? Of course there can be. There can be abuse in any aspect of the relationship between the worker and the employer. I don't know. It seems like common sense to me. What's the prospect? Where's the legislation right now? There's a House version and a Senate version. Some have claimed that was one of the reasons why the entire House-Senate relationship blew up into heaps of fire during the course of the summer, that there was a Senate version and a House version, and somebody's bill was going to pass and somebody else wasn't. But give us where these bills are right now.
So things are looking very good right now. On Friday, the House Labor Committee, on which I sit, we passed a version of the bill with some amendments. I think it made it a stronger, better bill for working people. We passed both the House and the Senate version, so the Senate has given, to my understanding, they're okay on this bill. And so
are they identical, or there's still some variations?
The two, we passed both out of House Labor, and they're identical bills right now. So things are looking good for tomorrow. Obviously, in this game, you never know. I never count chickens before they hatch. We've made that mistake before. But as I said, I'm feeling good, and I'm really excited. I think this is a big deal.
And any other important bills in your mind that are up here, really at the extension of the last day of the session, that are going to be up for a jump ball tomorrow, functionally?
Well, things are looking very good on the domestic violence gun legislation. Folks have put in so much work
Yeah.
on that. The legislative sponsors like Rep. Tansey and the Coalition Against Gun Violence, Moms Demand Action. It's crazy that it takes that much work to get something so common sense as saying convicted domestic abusers should not have access to guns, when we know how many incidents of violence come of that. But that's looking good, and that's a
And
big
that has
step
sweeping
forward.
support. I mean, the Speaker of the House is in favor of that across the board.
Yeah.
But obviously, gun lobbies in every state are extremely well-funded and very strong, and they're still in opposition of the bill. Is that correct?
I believe so. I think there's a sense of slippery slope if you give a tiny inch,
You're right.
but that's not how the real world operates.
Yeah.
Another big package we'll be voting on tomorrow is the Justice Reinvestment package, set of legislation to try to reform some aspects of our criminal justice system, make it smarter, make sure we're putting resources actually in trying to rehabilitate people. There's been some back and forth, different versions between the House and the Senate, and it's looking like that's been worked out, and the stronger versions are set to go. So tomorrow, from a progressive agenda perspective, could be a really, really good day for the state of Rhode Island.
The teachers union have been very outspoken about the veto by Governor Raimondo on the ongoing, whatever the term of art you want to use. There's a number of nicknames for it. Is there going to be a significant effort to override the governor's veto tomorrow?
So I just saw a tweet from one of your colleagues in the media saying that there was an announcement from the Speaker's office that they don't plan to do a vote. That was the sense that I've gotten from conversations. I voted for the original legislation, and I think it's pretty common sense. Folks have sort of built it up as a big deal. This is what the reality has been in Rhode Island, and I come originally from grew up in Chicago, where folks have the right to strike.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're going to have a negotiation, you need both sides to have some amount of leverage. So to me, it's a policy that makes sense, but right now it does not look like we're going to be moving forward with the veto override.
And leaving this elongated year of legislation, the never-ending legislature, what do you see going into January? If your scorecard's right and these three bills pass, what do you see going forward? Obviously, the Paw Sox funding structure is somewhere. Nobody really knows what the timeline on that is. Since we've gotten from the Speaker's office is that that's a January issue, not a special session issue. The Senate might or might not do something earlier, but that the House viewpoint is let's just take it in order. Gary Sass was on here just before Matt Factow Skyped in from Harvard, and Gary raised a significant number of issues, and he's neither for nor against it. He just raised a number of issues relative to the process and the cost structure and how the legislation is crafted and what the obligation of the state would be. Have you reached any determination on that legislation? Have you looked at it, reviewed it? Do you have a perspective on it yet?
So I've been trying to get through Tuesday and get sick time passed, and then really planning to dive in and do my homework on that. I'm glad that this does seem to be a prolonged process, so that folks like me and others can have the time to really take in every perspective. I think obviously there's a lot of concern and suspicion out there. What I hear from constituents, things like, we've got these very wealthy owners, and are we going to subsidize that? At the same time, there's a lot of love for the Paw Sox, and we want to do whatever we can to keep them there. Maybe not whatever we can, but if there's something we can do that makes sense, we want to do that. And so I would hope folks don't reflexively just come out against it at that, but we should definitely be going into it with concerns and a critical eye, and that's the approach
It was
take.
interesting. Gary made the point, and I think in this situation, he's right. He said, listen, the administration, the governor and Secretary Pryor make the point that other states have incentives to be able to attract and retain businesses. But in this case, we have the business, and no other state. Massachusetts has explicitly said they are not going to put together a funding package for the Pawtucket Red Sox. They don't fund public stadiums for private concerns. They didn't with the new Boston Garden, TD. They refused to when Fenway wanted to be both upgraded and replaced, and they didn't do it with Bob Kraft on Gillette. And Governor Baker has said no. So we seem to be negotiating against ourselves. Nobody else has an offer on the table. They've said that they were going to go out after July 1 and solicit other offers. They've received no other offers. Why do we need to give a subsidy to a group of men, most of them who don't live in Rhode Island? 9 out of the 10 concerns are not Rhode Island based, and have an estimated net worth in the $8 to $10 billion range. Billion. They have more net worth than the state of Rhode Island's budget is. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that right there, from my perspective, is exactly the analysis we should be making. If we don't do something, how real is the threat of losing them? That's something that I don't have a good answer to. That's some important information that you just discussed for figuring out the
Listen,
landscape.
Worcester would love to have them, but Worcester has also said we have no substantial resources. I mean, I think they might give them the land, but that might be it. Also, it's interesting. We have a piece today about Cory Booker and Senator Langford, a conservative Republican and a pretty moderate progressive Democrat, teaming up on a bill to ban the use of municipal bonds for sports stadiums. And they cited that there are 40 independent academic reports that have been done over the past couple decades, and every single one of them came to a determination that there's no net value of economic growth tied to a new sports stadium. So it's certainly, there's not going to be a shortage of debate on this thing over the next few months.
It's such an interesting question because people talk about the current deal and they say it's the best deal historically of this kind, but you're comparing it to a bunch of historical just
bad
disasters.
Right.
So how do you figure that? I mean, it's interesting. What I was thinking about the other day, if Rhode Island had just bought the Paw Sox, I don't know.
Yeah, right.
I think there are a couple publicly owned.
Sold for $27 million is what I understand. I mean, we don't know for sure. I'm told off the record we could have bought the team for less than not thought about it and then made an IPO.
You can't.
And people could have bought stock in it, like the Green Bay Packers are fan owned. A bunch of soccer teams in England are fan owned.
Right.
Good point. Maybe we should take them by eminent domain and then issue an IPO. Anything else folks should be looking out for tomorrow and in the near future from the standpoint of the legislature? Listen, this next year is going to be as wild and woolly a political news year as we've ever seen. There's been no let up since the last election, not for a day. I mean, the engagement in news, our growth has been astronomical, and it's tied to whether it was the presidential election or just how people feel about their community or whatever it might be. There's tremendous engagement in news and politics right now.
I think as far as next year goes, and thinking about that agenda and the priorities that people are going to be talking about, for me, for a whole lot of people, the Reproductive Health Care Act, that's going to be a huge, huge part of the conversation. We know that Justice Kennedy is set to potentially retire, and Roe v. Wade, it hangs on that thread.
Yeah.
So for people, when I hear in the state, we don't need to act at the state level until there's a crisis. I think this is a situation where we want to be proactive and we want to say this is a critical right that we need to protect. We need to do whatever we can at the state level. So I would definitely watch out for that. I think that always, climate action, renewable energy policy is a big thing to watch. We're seeing the impacts of that. We're seeing these hurricanes bearing down on our coasts. We're going to be feeling that here in Rhode Island this week and in the future. And so getting that bold, ambitious climate action, the fights to say, no, we don't want to keep investing in these dangerous fossil fuel infrastructure that's going to tie us to a system that's an existential threat for the ocean state. Those are also going to be interesting fights to follow next year.
Is Invenergy going to continue to be a fight?
That's that's one of the marquee ones.
Yeah.
And it's pretty amazing to see the commitment of those community members in Burrillville and across the state. I think that's the kind of issue where maybe some folks on one side said they might be fired up, but if we play wait and see,
Right.
they can't possibly sustain that energy.
They've not only sustained it,
they've sustained it,
increased
they've grown it,
Yeah.
they've grown it, and so that's what our climate movement needs.
It's funny, on Friday nights, Coalition Radio comes and uses our studio, and they cover that extensively. And the viewership off those issues related to that Burrillville plan, I think everyone in Burrillville, if you look at the numbers, is literally watching whatever the discussion point is. And it almost mirrors the population of Burrillville. I also think they've engaged a lot of people around the state. It's an interesting issue. Labor's for the plant. It's they see it as a lot of construction jobs and some ongoing jobs proportionally. The governor's had a number of positions on it, and Sheldon Whitehouse's office, which is right over there, he's come under some fire for not taking a position on it, despite being one of the national leaders on greenhouse gases. So it's been a wildly interesting from a news standpoint. EcoRI's done a tremendous job writing about it, and they're our media partner on some things, and we've done some reporting on it, but it's a wild issue, and doesn't look like it's going to let up anytime soon.
And by the way, I was talking to someone from the trades recently, and I thought they made a good point. They said, all right, if you're saying no to this, we need to have, what is the alternative, both to put people to work to fill our energy needs. We need to be, not just from my perspective as a climate activist, we need to be not just fighting against fossil fuel infrastructure, we need to be putting forward the ambitious climate agenda that's
Right.
going to get us where we need to go. Legislation like carbon pricing that I've introduced, like expanding virtual net metering. There's a whole lot of things that
Right.
we can be doing on the proactive end, and that needs to get the same amount of energy and drive as well.
I want to thank you so much for coming over. Good luck tomorrow, and we'll be reporting on all the big votes over there. It's an interesting way to end the session. There's been some rumors about you in the future. You might be doing something different in 2018. Did you want to share any thoughts on taking up golf, was it, or working on your card game?
Goal right now is to get sick
running
time
for
passed.
lieutenant governor?
Goal right now is to get sick time passed tomorrow. I think we've got a lot of work to do here in our state to make sure that regular people's voices are heard up at the
So
state
no
house.
major announcements on your golf game?
I don't have any golf announcements for you, but I do want to again thank you for the stance that Go Local Prov took on sick time. That was it was a bold stance for an editorial body to take, and we